Musicals still suck. Musicals still stink. But why would anybody ever give a damn what I think? Nah, I'm just kidding. We're not doing this one again. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below. It'll give you a pretty good overview of what the horror movie syllabus is all about. Basically, we put a particular subgenre out there, and then we look at 3 movies from that subgenre. But today is our doctorate level selection. It's where we revisit a subgenre we've talked about previously, kind of recap the video we did on that, and then add a new 4th doctorate level selection, something that's maybe a little less known, a little deeper cut, or something like that. Something just to talk about the subgenre a little bit more. And today, the subgenre that we're revisiting is the horror musical. And if you saw our previous horror musical video, or if you have seen some of the other videos on the channel, or if you just know me pretty well, you know that I hate musicals. It is not my bag. I am not the guy for musicals in general. I just don't like them. I don't even know much about them. I'm really ill-advised to be the person to be talking about this, frankly. I don't even know the difference between like a Weber and a Sondheim and a Miranda. Like Sondheim doesn't rap, right? That's the difference, right? So obviously I'm not the guy. So it's like really not my area to be speaking authoritatively, but that doesn't stop me because it's my channel and I do what I want, right? So what I did last time is I talked about first why I don't like musicals in general and kind of recap that they are weird to me because people break out into song and it kind of doesn't feel quite so scary anymore when they do for horror musicals, and just a lot of the things that bother me about the horror musical. And then I just picked a couple of horror musicals that I actually think are okay. Ones that didn't bother me, ones that were things I actually enjoyed, you know? We did talk about a couple, like Rocky Horror Picture Show, for example, that I just don't like at all. But this is the list of movies that I could get behind, even though I have a severe disdain for musicals. So I'll go ahead and recap the movies that I picked last time right now, and then we'll follow it up with my doctorate level selection. La. The first horror musical that we talked about was Little Shop of Horrors. And Little Shop of Horrors is actually a movie that I bona fide like because it's fun. We're talking about the 1980s version with Rick Moranis and not the older version. We're talking about the musical version that is just infectious. I don't know why this one doesn't put me off the way other musicals do, but I find the songs to be catchy. I don't feel like they stop the show and kind of take me out of the story. In fact, I think like they add to it. I think that the cast is very strong. Rick Moranis holding it down, and of course Steve Martin, who steals every scene that he's in. The movie is surprisingly gruesome, a lot of fun. It's got a fun idea, and I guess the word I keep coming back to over and over again is fun, because this movie is fun. I really enjoy it. I bona fide like this one. This is one that I would actually watch, not just for a chore or anything like that, but I would actually watch it just to enjoy it. I have many times. I think it's a great movie, and it's definitely the one that I was going to put on the horror movie syllabus. The next horror musical we talked about was Stage Fright. And Stage Fright was a surprise to me. It was a movie that I watched at random on Netflix late one night and didn't know that it was a musical till I started watching it. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was actually quite good, even though it was a musical, partly because the movie was set at like a theater camp, and so there's singers there, and so the music kind of works in the setting of the movie. And I've got a soft spot for slashers, so I'm already halfway there when there's a slasher movie, and it is a solid slasher movie, and the music actually worked for it. The killer was actually pretty cool, and having him sing didn't take me out of the movie because they made him kind of a rocker guy, and that worked for me. This was actually good. It was a surprise and a pleasant one, and so I felt compelled to bring it up and tell people about it, because I feel like this one doesn't get talked about nearly as much as some of the other movies that we talked about in the video. And it deserved a little bit of shine, because if it can win me over, it should theoretically be able to win anybody over. And that's worth talking about. And the last horror musical that we talked about was Anna and the Apocalypse. And Anna and the Apocalypse had a lot of buzz around it. It was a pretty popular movie. It kind of had a bit of a reputation when it came out. And it won me over. I went in arms crossed, not really expecting to enjoy it. And it did win me over, though I have to admit, I think I would have enjoyed the movie better without the songs. I think with the songs, the movie's only okay to me, and I think I would have enjoyed it better without the songs. Although I'm probably in the severe minority on that point. I think a lot of people just find it to be your stereotypical standard zombie flick without the musical aspect to it. But I found the charming cast to be very likable. I like the lead a lot, the knockoff Anna Kendrick, and I thought that this was definitely a movie that was worth checking out. And again, won me over just kind of like stage fright. I knew this one was a musical going in, didn't expect to like it, wound up enjoying it, and would definitely recommend it to people, especially if you like musicals. And again, I can't speak to how good the music in the musical is by musical standards, but seemed fine to me. I would rather be without the musical aspect of it, but it's definitely one worth watching. And if you haven't seen it, you should be checking it out for sure. So those were our selections for horror musicals, and now we're going to get into our doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection is Phantom of the Paradise. Phantom of the Paradise came out in 1974, and it's directed by Brian De Palma, written and directed by Brian De Palma. And I'm a De Palma fan, so it was weird this movie wasn't on my radar because I saw this one get recommended a couple of times in various comments in other videos. It was on my to watch list, but when I watched it, for like the Is It Syllabus Worthy series, it actually is syllabus worthy because here we are talking about it as a doctorate level selection. It was definitely syllabus worthy, so that's the answer to that question. So we're going to go ahead and get into it right now. If you haven't seen it before, the movie kind of tracks Phantom of the Opera / Faust / Picture of Dorian Gray, where we have a aspiring songwriter whose music gets stolen by a very powerful producer who decides to use it in a way that he doesn't want it to be used and with other people and to not give the writer credit. And the writer winds up getting hurt and winds up living as a recluse and plotting his revenge. And his revenge is going to be quite melodic, so to speak. And the hijinks abound, of course, as they always do. And the movie is interesting for a number of reasons, but the number one reason is the presence of Paul Williams. And this movie came out in the 1970s, and Paul Williams is a legendary 1970s songwriter, and he's written a lot of hits. He's done a lot of musical scores, and he is a bona fide musician / rock legend. And he's doing the music for this movie, and he's also starring as the producer in the movie. So he's actually in the movie. And if you are familiar with his music or with him, it gives it a bona fide. It gives it an authenticity that really works. So as you know, one of my big issues with musicals is the invasion of a song into a narrative, especially a dramatic narrative. A song, all of a sudden everybody starts breaking out into song and starts singing, and it takes me out of it. It doesn't make any sense. It's just so weird and out of place and jarring. But when you have the movie like this, where it's set in the music industry and it's mostly set in a nightclub where there is singing and performing going on, the music oftentimes is kind of diegetic. It actually is played in universe in the movie. And so the songs don't feel so jarring. They make sense and they work for me. They're good. They're good songs. I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to go and buy the soundtrack, and I'm not going to have it playing on my Spotify playlist or whatever. But they're good. They feel like actual era appropriate, time appropriate songs that are pop songs, and they work. And again, credit to Paul Williams. He's the one who's responsible for that, and it works really, really well. It's the key to why this movie worked for me. Now, in addition to Paul Williams, you have a William Finley in the title role playing the Phantom. And although he's not the singer, Paul Williams is doing the singing voice apparently for the Phantom, which is, again, pretty cool. It's got Jessica Harper from Suspiria. Who doesn't love Jessica Harper? And it's even got like a voice cameo from Rod Serling at the beginning. So right off the bat, I recognized it right away. Right off the bat, this movie's trying to appeal to Victor. It's got Brian De Palma, who I do love. And it's weird because this is not normally the kind of movie I would expect from Brian De Palma. But when I watched it, yeah, I could see the De Palma-ness in it. You could see like the split screen. His style was all over this, and I was vibing with it. I was really vibing with it. Like the people who recommended this, like I said, a few different people recommended this. All seemed to think that this one would actually kind of manage to circumvent my anti-musical bias and really hit home for me, and they were right. And a large part of that is Paul Williams, and a large part of that is Brian De Palma. Those two together worked for me. It wound up being a lot of fun. This movie, like, I was never put off by the musical interludes. They all made sense. They were, like, in the story, and they were catchy. Like I said, the music was catchy. The look of the Phantom was pretty cool. It's kind of ridiculous looking, and apparently very influential, both the look of the Phantom and the movie in general. Like, the look of the Phantom is apparently an influence on a lot of manga artists, Japanese manga artists. His style, when you look at it, you can kind of see, if you're familiar with that, you can kind of see what they're talking about there. Apparently, Daft Punk was very influenced by this movie. There's a lot of people who cite this movie as an influence. That, of course, makes it rather noteworthy and makes it very syllabus worthy. Hence, we're talking about it here. But we're talking about it not because it was noteworthy, but because I really enjoyed it. I really actually was shocked to find out that I liked this movie. I watched it as a chore, and it wound up being a lot of fun. Like, Brian De Palma, Paul Williams 70s rock and diegetic style music is gonna be there for me in terms of circumventing that musical badness for me. I think it's cool. I think using the Phantom of the Opera framework for the story, but also kind of having the Faustian bargain in there, like a bargain with the devil, and having this this little aspect of like Dorian Gray in there too. All stories I like, all things that are kind of working for me. And it's funny because apparently it didn't work for audiences initially. It was a kind of a bomb initially. It was kind of critically panned. People didn't like it. It did not get good reviews. But it really has become a cult favorite over the years. Like, there's festivals about it and stuff like that. Like I said, it's been influential on artists in coming up. And it's really interesting how much of an impact it wound up making despite its initial bomb, because I would have thought it would be more likely to have been popular in the mid 70s than it is now. But it's the reverse that's true. Like, this definitely has kind of a 70s a feel to it. And not like, oh, it's like all disco or whatever, but just, you can tell. It's kind of got that 70s feel to it. It's got like, it's got a little bit of a Grease feel to it too. And if you've seen it, you know a little bit what I'm talking about, at least early on. And it's not clear to me why it wasn't popular. I read some of the reviews and I just wasn't tracking it. I don't know what, maybe it was just a little too weird or a little too dark for them. I don't know, but it just didn't click with them then. It clicks with people now, and it's easy for me to see why it clicks now. And what's also interesting, and people even at the time noted this in the reviews, it's operating as a movie about the music industry, but also a satire and critique of the music industry. And it's not the most revelatory or scintillating or original attack on the music industry, but it is a still contemporary and relevant critique of the music industry. Like, all of the stuff that they're talking about there and the way that artists get taken advantage of and how producers manipulate things and the money aspect of it and all that, the fame aspect of it, it's all still true. 40 years later, 50 years later, it's all still true. And that's wild. It's wild that this movie resonates just as much today as it did when it came out. And that's another reason why it's easy to see why people like it so much. It's easy to see why people were telling me I needed to check this movie out. They were right. This one is good. I liked this one quite a bit. I would probably revisit this one. In fact, I almost certainly would revisit this one at some point in time. Again, I won't watch a lot because, again, it's still a musical. It's still a musical. It's still not exactly my number one cup of tea, but I would not be opposed to watching this again because it is fun. It is good. It's got good talent behind it, good talent on the screen. It's just a well-made, entertaining, fun movie that's got a lot of things going on for it. And if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Especially if you do like musicals, this is one to check out because it seems like people who like musicals like this one a lot. And I'm guessing because of people, telling me in the comments to check it out, a lot of you have seen it. So make the case in the comments why you love it so much, because again, I don't think you need to convince me. You already have. But if anybody else is on the fence about it, convince them, because this is one that's worth seeing. It's worth the time. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it before. So that was our doctorate level selection for the horror musical subgenre. But I actually have a extra credit selection for you as well. And this one, this one is an interesting one. We'll get into it. Extra credit level selection is Dancer in the Dark. Dancer in the Dark came out in 2000 and is a Lars von Trier film. And you know me, I like me some von Trier. We've talked about him a number of times on the channel. We probably will talk about him again. And this movie was one that I almost put on the original horror musical video, and I opted not to because, by all accounts, it's not really a horror movie. It is a drama. I know this. You know this. But it's also deeply, deeply disturbing. And so we're going to talk about it anyways. I wanted to talk about it last time, talked myself out of it because it's not really horror, talked myself back into it for this video because I want to talk about it. And it's something to definitely talk about if you haven't seen it before. The movie stars Icelandic pop singer Björk as a immigrant Czech woman who's working in a factory, and she has a degenerative eye condition, so she's slowly going blind. And it's also going to affect her son. And so she's trying to save up money to get him a surgery so that he won't go blind, so that he won't lose his eyesight. And unfortunately, people take some advantage of her. Things go awry, and she gets put into a desperate situation where she winds up making some desperate and not necessarily very smart moves. And it leads to a series of tragic events that I'm not going to spoil in case you haven't seen it. But it's rough, man. It's rough watching. And, I would say hijinks abound, but these ain't hijinks, man. This movie's dark. This movie is dark and depressing. And like I said, I wasn't even sure about doing it because it's not really a horror movie. It really does play as a drama for the bulk of the movie. And I changed my mind when I was talking to my wife about it. And I didn't realize she had seen this back when she was in college. And she's like, oh, yeah, I saw a movie in college. And it was so disturbing. And that solidified it for me. 20 plus years later, she remembers it being so disturbing. That's all I needed to hear. And honestly, I want to talk about this again. Lars von Trier, somebody whose films I really like, but it's not. I gotta point out, I like his films. He's kind of a garbage person. I'm not a fan of him. I'm a fan of the films, and I think it's worth noting, especially because of some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes in this movie. And why don't we just get into it? Actually, so Bjork has never made a movie after this, as far as I know, and I believe the reasoning is because of the bad experience she had on this movie. She accused Lars von Trier and his producer Peter Jensen of the studio that they had, the production company they had, Zentropa, of sexual harassment and other abusive things. And it's easy to believe those things. Like they of course denied that, but Peter Jensen and Zentropa did get in trouble for this. So there is fire to that smoke, and that's not cool. It's not cool at all. And go look up Lars von Trier. You'll see there other controversial stuff, the Hitler stuff, everything like that. Gross dude. There's no denying it. But damn, he makes a good movie, and this is a very, very good movie. It's very powerful. And part of why it works so well, part of why it's powerful is that Von Trier has this thing, he calls it Dogma 95. It's a filmmaking philosophy that he and some other filmmakers follow. It's like using handheld cameras, natural light, and really trying to kind of get rid of the artifice of movie making to make it try to feel more authentic and realistic. And the combination of that with a unpolished actor like Bjork, who is fantastic in this movie, works really well to make this feel extremely real, very dreary, very washed out and depressing, and just, it's like set in the 1960s in this factory, and it just feels so dour. But then the musical interludes happen, and they are true interludes. And what they are is Bjork's character fantasizing about a better life. She loves musicals, so when she's stuck in her dreary job and just having a bad day or whatever, she goes in these musical fantasies, and you see these musical things, and suddenly the color palette gets brighter, and it's a whole musical production in the factory or wherever, singing and dancing. And of course, Bjork is a professional singer. And in full disclosure, I'm not what I'd call a Bjork fan. I'm ambivalent about her. I don't dislike her, but I don't really care. I'm not that into her music, but I'm not against her music. I've heard a few of the songs. They're okay. They're good. I've never owned a Bjork album, though. I've never gone to a concert or whatever. But I do think that she is good as a singer, and she's really good here. The music hits better because of what it means. The interludes being a break from her dreary reality, and the visual cues that show you how much brighter it is in her brain than it is in real life, and her fantasies being so much more uplifting. Like, even as the movie gets increasingly darker and darker and darker, she's still able to find these moments of joy in the musicals, and it works really, really well. And juxtaposing those, very theatrical musical performances with the Dogma 95 very gritty and realistic style of Von Trier, it's masterful. It really works. It hits hard. Like I said, my wife watched this a couple decades ago, and she still remembers the impact that it had. It is not a fun musical. It's not your stereotypical drama. It's something else, and it's something really, really challenging, and so challenging that I don't think that it really hit well with everybody. It's a polarizing movie with critics and with fans. Some people really, really love it. Some people really don't like it. And it's easy to see why. Like I said, it's interesting because, you've got Bjork in the center of it, and I think she's given a great performance. It's an awkward performance, and intentionally it works for the character and it works for the movie. And she is surrounded with some talent and people you'll recognize. Catherine Deneuve is in there. Peter Stormare is in there in a wonderfully sweet role. Playing very against type. You always see him as a villain, as an evil guy, and he's wonderfully sweet in this movie. And it's nice. It's refreshing to see him playing something kind of against his typecasting, and he's really good. Everybody's really good in this movie, and they are giving strong performances, and Bjork is matching what she's got to work with her there. It's a really strong performance, and it needs to be in order for this movie to resonate as much as it does. And it does. It resonates. But it ain't for everybody. So, like, if you're sensitive to anything, frankly, maybe check this one out on, like, doesthedogdie.com or something like that. Get an idea of some of the stuff that's going to happen, especially the way it ends. Because it's bleak, it's dour, it's depressing, it's sad, it's upsetting, it's infuriating, it's horrific. It is. It's just a tough watch of a movie. And it's not necessarily going to leave you feeling good and happy like most musicals would. So it's not exactly a fun ride, but it is a work of art. With all of its warts and problems and benefits and bona fides, it's a work of art, and I think it's fantastic. I love it, and so I really want to talk about it. So I'm talking about it. Horror label be damned. So let me know if you've seen Dancing in the Dark. Let me know your thoughts on it. Like how much did you think it warrants being talked about as a horror movie? Did you find it depressing? Give me your thoughts on it, and if you haven't seen it, think about whether or not you want to check it out. It's not necessarily for everybody, but that's my thoughts on Dancer in the Dark. Had to talk about it. So that's going to do it for our revisiting of the horror musical subgenre. Like I said, not my favorite subgenre, but did like these movies, and y'all were right about Phantom of the Paradise. It's definitely worth watching. And now it's time to watch me read a horror trivia pursuit card. It's that time where I'm going to answer a question live on camera. And you know what? We're going to go with the monster category on the card, mostly because we just haven't done that category in a while, I feel like. But also, the Phantom in Phantom of the Paradise is arguably a monster, so why not? We'll just call it that, and we're just going to go with the monster category, because why not? Here's our question. What was the name of the Swiss surrealist painter who designed the titular creature in 1979's Alien? And of course, I know the answer to this, because I love me some Alien, and I'm going to guess a lot of you out there know the answer to this question too. This is a pretty easy one if you're a fan of the series, if you kind of follow these kind of things. Especially if you're an Alien fan, you know this pretty much for sure. If you're a fan of that franchise, even if you're not, you might know this because it's a pretty well-known name. It's pretty well-known lore, less for the painting career and more for the influence not only on the Alien franchise, but on alien monsters in general. Like horror, sci-fi, aliens in horror, all really owe a debt of gratitude to Alien, the movie, the franchise, and to this artist for designing it. Because before this movie, the visualization of aliens in horror movies is very different. It's more humanoid shaped and a little bit more basic and a little more like 50s oriented and stuff like that. And then after Alien, and I think I talked about this when I talked about the movie in our Alien subgenre movie, subgenre video, I think I talked about how since this movie, most Alien movies that you see, they kind of have some sort of variation or feel that kind of is reminiscent of the xenomorph from Alien. It really is hugely influential in movies going forward that deal with alien monsters, alien creatures, alien horror. So super important artist, super important in the realm of horror, and super influential in that. So I know the answer. I know it for sure, 100% for sure. Do you know the answer? Lock in your answer right now because I'm about to read it off. I'm going to give my answer and then I'm going to read it off. So lock it in. Okay. My answer, of course, is H.R. Giger. H.R. Giger, who designed the alien xenomorph. Masterful artist. And let's just check the card. H.R. Giger. H.R. Giger. Yes. So that one was easy for me and probably easy for any Alien fan or even just like really hardcore horror fans. You probably know about this because it's super important. But if for some reason you don't, I'd recommend checking out some Giger work. It's very cool and like biomechanical and kind of sexual and stuff like that. So really interesting stuff. If you've seen Alien, you know kind of what to expect from his work. And if you haven't seen Alien, God help you, get on that right away. You need to see Alien. It's important. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you very much for hanging out. Thank you very much for making recommendations. Thank you guys very much for cluing me into Phantom of the Paradise. Obviously, I liked it quite a bit. And I appreciate you guys for coming up with recommendations and for just hanging out with me and talking horror. I really appreciate you guys. Until next week, we'll do something completely different then. For now, we'll just say, class dismissed.